Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, we're jumping right in today because there is this wild, honestly kind of existential anxiety spreading across the literary and academic worlds right now. You've probably seen it, right? A student turns in a brilliant essay or maybe a poem wins a huge award and inevitably someone runs it through an AI detector. The software spits out likely AI generated and boom, the internet absolutely explodes. We've got camps defending the writer, camps defending the algorithm, it's a whole shebang. But are we even asking the right questions? Today, we're diving into this fascinating recent paper by Dawson Preethi called The Detector and the Author. Preethi basically says, hey, this entire debate, it's wildly off base. And to prove it, he brings in some heavy-hitting philosophy from Roland, Barthes, and Jacques Lacan. So here's a really quick roadmap for our philosophical detective story today. We're going to look at the plagiarism illusion, tackle provenance versus probability, dig into the good writing paradox, and then zoom way out to some deep 20th century French literary theory before figuring out what lies beyond the detector.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the plagiarism illusion. It's this comfortable little world of copied text we used to live in. To really get this, we've got to totally dismantle the idea that AI detection is just a, souped-up version of the old plagiarism checkers we've been using for decades. Preethi starts this whole investigation with one absolutely core question. What exactly are we trying to detect? Because for literally centuries, the problem of copied text was pretty straightforward. One text existed, another text copied it. You could hold them side by side and point to the stolen paragraph. The logic was rock solid. But, well, AI completely blew that paradigm out of the water.
Which brings us right into Section 2, provenance versus probability. Two fundamentally different questions.
We have to contrast how we used to look at copying with what these modern algorithms are actually doing under the hood. Plagiarism detection, historically, is all about provenance. It's an investigation of history. It's asking, hey, did these exact words come from somewhere else? Who is the actual author? AI detection, though, it's all about probability. It investigates patterns. It's asking, statistically speaking, does this writing kind of resemble a machine? And confusing those two completely different concepts is exactly what's driving this massive controversy we see today.
So if these detectors aren't out there looking for stolen text, what are they actually looking at? Well, they're hunting for statistical patterns. They're scanning sentence rhythm, vocabulary distribution, how predictable the words are, grammatical regularity, structural repetition, basically all the math. But you know what's really fascinating? It's what is completely absent from that list. The detector doesn't see the author's desk. It doesn't see the messy, agonizing drafting process. It has no idea if someone spent 6 months crying over a manuscript or just, 6 seconds throwing a prompt into a chatbot. It strictly sees the final product.
And that brings us to this absolutely crucial quote from Preethi. He says, a fingerprint and a resemblance are not the same thing. Look, when a detector flags a text as 99% AI generated, it sounds incredibly scientific, right? It sounds authoritative. But actually, scratch that, it's just an inferred origin based on a statistical resemblance. It's not actual concrete evidence of authorship. It's really just a highly educated guess.
All right, let's look at Section 3, the good writing paradox, where human discipline ends up looking exactly like a machine.
This builds into something that is so incredibly frustrating for writers. Think about highly disciplined writing for a second. Academic prose, legal documents, scientific papers. What do those genres absolutely demand? They require consistency, crystal clear clarity, a super predictable structure, and flawless grammar. But wait, those are the exact same characteristics that AI detectors are trained to flag as machine-generated. It's a total paradox. Careful, structured human writing naturally mimics the output of a large language model. So an experienced editor polishing a manuscript, or maybe a skilled non-native English speaker strictly following the textbook rules, they are incredibly likely to trigger a false positive. And that leads to this huge realization. The detector is not identifying intelligence, it is identifying regularity. And guess what? Regularity has never belonged exclusively to machines. Human beings have spent centuries training themselves to write with precise, predictable regularity. So penalizing people literally just for writing well, that's a massive, fundamental flaw in how we're using these tools.
Let's zoom out a bit for Section 4, Barthes and the death of the author, where we question the very source of meaning. Preethi takes things in a really brilliant direction here. To understand our current obsession with finding the true author, we actually need to rewind to the French literary theorist Roland Barthes and his famous concept, the death of the author. Now, long before ChatGPT was even a thought, Barthes proposed this super radical idea. He argued that we place way too much importance on the person holding the pen. He claimed that once a text is out there in the world, its meaning isn't owned by the author anymore. It emerges through the readers, the culture, the language itself. Preeti points out how wild it is that this perfectly describes our current moment. We're obsessing over whether an AI or a human wrote something just to validate if it's good. But Barthes would ask, why does authorship dictate value in the first place? If a story moves you to tears, does it suddenly become worthless if a software program helped write it? We are desperately clinging to this rigid idea of authorship that literary theorists started tearing down decades ago.
Moving right into Section 5, Lacan, the language machine. The idea that we don't just use language, language actually uses us.
It gets even deeper, trust me. Let's bring in the psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan to really blur the line between human and machine. Lacan argued that human beings don't just pick up language and use it like a tool. Instead, language uses us. Think about it. When you're born, you're dropped into this massive, pre-existing system of words, metaphors, and social structures. That system shapes your thoughts long before you ever consciously choose them. For Lacan, humans are constantly generating sentences from patterns that are already baked into language, which honestly sounds a whole lot like what an AI does, doesn't it? The difference between a human and a machine isn't that one uses patterns and the other doesn't. They literally both do.
But here is the massive difference. Here is where the detector completely falls flat. The detector sees sentences, it sees syntax, it sees probability, but it entirely misses human desire, longing, the unconscious. Lacan pointed out that these are the deeply messy, fundamentally human dimensions of writing. A detector can't scan your memories. It doesn't know your lived experience. It's totally blind to the soul of the text and only sees the statistical exhaust left behind on the page.
So, Section 6. Beyond the detector. How do we redefine verification and creativity going forward?
Where does this all leave us? Well, Preeti argues that simply asking, is this AI or not, is literally the wrong question. It's missing the point entirely. The real conversation should be about how the AI participated. I mean, there's a huge difference between just blindly copying a machine-generated essay and slapping your name on it, versus using an AI as a sounding board, a structural editor, a research assistant, or a true collaborator throughout a long project. When we collapse all those highly nuanced, completely different activities into a single pass-or-fail AI detection score, we just create chaos. It's a complex process, and it absolutely demands a complex evaluation.
If institutions or publishers actually need to verify human authorship, Preeti offers a really practical, process-based solution. The proof isn't going to be found in the final text, it's in the journey. We need to be looking at draft histories, checking revision records, reviewing version control logs, documenting the messy creative process itself. Those steps prove how a piece of writing actually evolved over time. They provide the deeply human context that a statistical algorithm is just never going to be able to give us.
I really want you to let this quote from the paper sink in for a second. The final manuscript is only the endpoint of a much larger journey. If we just obsess over that final string of words, we are completely missing the actual beautiful journey of creation.
And that brings us to a final, really provocative thought to leave you with. Preeti's work highlights that AI didn't actually invent these deep philosophical problems about authorship. It just dragged them out into the light. This massive anxiety we're all feeling, it's not really about the software, and it's not about the detection tools. It is fundamentally an existential debate about originality and creativity. And this huge question, what do we actually mean by being human? Because as the boundaries between human language and machine language keep blurring, how we answer that question is going to define the very future of creativity itself. Definitely something to chew on. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.